Hey, I'm Emily, I said, somewhat awkwardly extending my hand at a small get-together where I first laid eyes on Alex. He was a mutual friend's acquaintance, and there was something immediately approachable about him. Alex, he responded, his handshake firm and friendly. So, you're the financial analyst Sarah keeps talking about? I laughed, a bit embarrassed. Yep, that's me. And you're the guy who owns a restaurant and loves hiking? He smiled, and his eyes lit up. Absolutely. Nothing tops a good hike. You a fan? Totally, I replied. Our conversation flowed effortlessly from there, delving into our shared passions for outdoor adventures and favorite hiking spots. What started as casual meetings soon blossomed into something more. Dates followed, each one feeling more natural than the last. We discovered a comfortable rhythm together, finding joy in our shared interests. It felt like Alex and I had known each other for ages. One evening, after a particularly enjoyable hike, Alex stopped and looked at me intently. Emily, this might sound crazy, but I think what we have is pretty special. Do you feel it too? My heart raced, but I couldn't hide my smile. I do, Alex. It's like we were meant to meet. Fast forward a year, and we were exchanging vows in a simple but heartfelt wedding ceremony. Just us, our families, and a few close friends. Afterwards, we moved into the house I inherited from my grandmother. It wasn't a modern building, but it had a warmth and charm to it. I remember watching Alex as he first walked through the house. He wandered from room to room, absorbing every detail. This house has character, Em, he said with a smile. It feels like a home. I was relieved. I'm glad you think so. I was worried it might seem too old-fashioned for you. Alex laughed heartily. Old-fashioned? No way. It's perfect. It's us. Living in the house I inherited from my grandma was like stepping back in time. Every creaky floorboard and the slightly faded wallpaper told a story. Alex and I loved it, but I was nervous about his mom's first visit. Mrs. Carter, with her taste for all things new and expensive, was a stark contrast to our humble abode. The day she arrived, she stepped into the living room, her high heels clicking sharply on the wooden floor. She looked around with a barely concealed frown. "Oh, this is where you live," she said, her tone dripping with skepticism. "It's quaint." I clenched my jaw, feeling a sting from her words. Alex gave my hand a reassuring squeeze, communicating his support. "Yeah, Mom, isn't it great? Emily's really made it feel like home." Mrs. Carter raised an eyebrow, her gaze sweeping across the room. "Well, it's certainly quaint. But, darling, you could do so much better." Alex squeezed my hand, a silent show of support. I appreciated his gesture, but Mrs. Carter's words stung. I loved this house, every imperfection and memory it held. The conversation shifted to dinner plans, but Mrs. Carter's comments lingered in my mind. "So, Emily, what are we having? I assume we're dining in tonight?" I nodded, trying to sound upbeat. "Yes, I thought I'd cook something special. A family recipe." "Oh, how domestic," she remarked, a hint of sarcasm in her voice. "I hope it's up to standard." Dinner was an awkward affair. I could feel Mrs. Carter's eyes judging every aspect of the meal. Alex did his best to keep the conversation light, but the tension was palpable. After dinner, as we sat in the living room, Mrs. Carter's critique continued. "Alex, really, this place could use some updating. Why don't you move somewhere more modern?" Alex, trying to keep the peace, replied, "Mom, we've talked about this. Emily and I love it here. It's our first home together." Mrs. Carter sighed dramatically. "Well, I suppose if you're happy. But really, think about your future. This place is hardly suitable for a family." I bit my tongue, feeling my patience wearing thin. This house was more than just walls and a roof to me. It was a part of my family's history, a piece of my heart. As she finally left, I felt a mixture of relief and frustration. Alex wrapped his arms around me, whispering, "Don't let her get to you, Em. This is our home, and I wouldn't change a thing." I leaned into his embrace, grateful for his support, but dreading the thought of future visits. Mrs. Carter's words echoed in my mind, but I was determined not to let her snide remarks tarnish the love and memories this old house held for us. The evening air was cool as Alex walked through the door, looking more defeated than I'd ever seen him. The restaurant, his lifelong dream, was now a source of endless worry. I could see the stress etched in the lines of his face. "Another rough day?" I asked, handing him a cup of coffee. He slumped into a chair at our kitchen table, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah, it's just, nothing's working, Em. I don't know how much longer I can keep the doors open." I sat across from him, my mind racing for ways to help. "Have you looked into the finances thoroughly? Maybe there's a leak somewhere, something you've missed?" Alex let out a humorless laugh. "Finances were never my strong suit. I'm a chef, not an accountant." A thought struck me. "Well, I could give it a try. I'm no expert in restaurant finances, but I know my way around numbers." He looked up, his eyes meeting mine. "You'd do that? For me? For the restaurant?" "Of course," I replied, feeling a mix of nervousness and determination. "Let's see what we can find." The following morning, I dived into the restaurant's accounts. Receipts, invoices, and spreadsheets were spread across our dining table. It was worse than I'd feared. Expenses were sky-high, and the income wasn't tracked properly. Later that evening, I presented my findings to Alex. "Okay, here's the deal. Your food costs are through the roof. You're spending a fortune on imported ingredients that you can easily substitute with local ones." Alex leaned in, scrutinizing the papers. "But won't that change the taste?" I shook my head. "Not necessarily. It's about being smart with choices. Plus, your menu prices, they're too low. You're undervaluing your dishes." He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "I always wanted to make it affordable. But I see your point. And there's more," I continued, pointing to another column. "These miscellaneous expenses, fancy napkins, expensive cleaning services. You can cut back without compromising quality." The weeks that followed were a blur of activity. Alex revamped the menu, striking a balance between cost and quality. I negotiated with suppliers, trimming down the unnecessary expenses. We even hosted a few special events to attract more customers. One evening, Alex came home with a rare spark in his eyes. He wrapped me in a hug, his voice muffled. "I can't believe it. We're actually making a profit. It's working, Em. It's really working." We stood there in the kitchen, holding each other, the weight of the past weeks lifting slightly. The restaurant was turning a corner, thanks to our combined efforts. But as I would soon learn, success comes with its own set of challenges, ones that neither of us had anticipated. Alex's restaurant was now buzzing with success, and with that success came a change in him that I hadn't anticipated. It started small. A new watch here, a designer shirt there. But it quickly escalated. One evening, he came home with a brand new, high-end smartphone. "Check this out, Em," he said, his face lit up with excitement. "Latest model. Isn't it cool?" I glanced at the phone and then at him. "It's nice, Alex, but do you really need it? I thought we agreed to be careful with spending." He shrugged, his attention still on the phone. I know. But the restaurant's doing great. We can afford a few luxuries." It wasn't just the purchases that bothered me, it was his attitude. The careful, considerate man I married seemed to be getting lost in a wave of extravagance. "Alex, We need to think about reinvesting in the restaurant, remember? And our own savings, I reminded him, hoping to spark some of his earlier practicality. He waved off my concern. Relax. The restaurant's making more than enough. We deserve to enjoy the money. But it didn't stop there. Bills for extravagant dinners and nights out started to pile up. Each time I brought it up, Alex dismissed it. We're fine, Em. Stop worrying so much. One day, I noticed our joint account was running lower than it should. Alex, we're supposed to be saving for the future. You're spending way too much. He looked at me, his expression one of annoyance. Em, why are you always on my case? Let me enjoy my success. But it's our future, Alex. We can't just blow through the money like this. He scoffed. My restaurant, my money. I'll spend it how I want. I was taken aback. This wasn't the Alex I knew, the one who valued our partnership. I tried a different approach. What about contributing to the household expenses? We agreed to split them. He rolled his eyes. That's your house, Em. Why should I pay for something that's already yours? As the days passed, the tension between us grew. His spending continued, and each time I brought it up, it led to an argument. The man I had worked so hard with to save his dream was now recklessly throwing away our future for short-lived pleasures. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, Mrs. Carter, Alex's mother, decided she wanted to be closer to us. The day she called, I was already feeling overwhelmed with the way things were going at home. Emily, dear, I've been thinking. Mrs. Carter's voice echoed through the phone in her usual, lofty tone. It's time I moved closer to you and Alex. This town is just too dull for me. I hesitated, gripping the phone a little tighter. That's a big decision, Mrs. Carter. Are you sure? Oh, absolutely. But don't worry, I won't impose on you in that quaint little house of yours. I'll need you to find me a nice apartment nearby, she said, as if it was the most natural request in the world. I was taken aback. An apartment? Mrs. Carter, I'm not sure if... She cut me off. Now, Emily, I won't take no for an answer. A small, stylish place will do. I'm sure you can handle the rent for a while. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'll need to discuss this with Alex, I managed to say before ending the call. When I told Alex about his mother's request, he just shrugged. I don't know, Em. I'm a bit tight on cash right now with the restaurant and all. Maybe you could cover it? I stared at him, incredulous. Me? Alex, we're already stretching our budget with your spending. How can we afford her rent too? He avoided my gaze. It's just for a while, Em. Until I get things sorted. Come on, for my mom? Reluctantly, I agreed to rent an apartment for Mrs. Carter for 6 months. It cost us $2,000 a month, a significant hit to our savings. The day she moved into her new place, Mrs. Carter made sure to let me know her standards. It's smaller than I'm used to, but I suppose it'll have to do. You've done an adequate job, Emily. I forced a smile, trying to keep the peace. I'm glad you like it, Mrs. Carter. But things only got worse. Mrs. Carter started coming over every day. Each visit was a reminder of how different our worlds were. She'd walk around our house, her nose turned up at everything. This old thing is still here? I thought you'd have gotten rid of it by now, she commented one day, eyeing an antique vase my grandmother had left me. I clenched my fists, feeling my patience wear thin. It's a family heirloom, Mrs. Carter. It means a lot to me. She just sniffed. Sentimentality. I never saw the point. Each of her visits left me feeling more drained and frustrated. I tried to talk to Alex about it, but he'd just brush it off. She's just set in her ways, Em. Let's not make a big deal out of it. But it was a big deal to me. Mrs. Carter's presence was like a constant, dark cloud over our home, and I was starting to feel like there was no escaping it. The weight of her expectations and criticisms was becoming too much to bear, and I felt trapped in a situation with no easy way out. Mrs. Carter's daily visits became a routine I dreaded. Each day, she brought a fresh wave of criticism and backhanded comments. I tried to keep my cool, but it was wearing me down. One particularly exhausting evening, as I was preparing dinner, she walked into the kitchen. "Oh, cooking again, Emily? You do know there are restaurants for that sort of thing," she said with a smirk. I forced a smile, chopping vegetables a bit more aggressively than necessary. "I enjoy cooking, Mrs. Carter. It's relaxing for me," she scoffed, leaning against the counter. "Relaxing? A woman of your caliber should be relaxing in a spa, not slaving away in a kitchen. But then again, you always were a bit plain." The conversation shifted when she casually mentioned something that caught me off guard. "You know, I stopped by the restaurant the other day. Alex has hired some new waitresses. Young, pretty things. Very attentive." A pang of something, jealousy, insecurity, twisted in my stomach. "New waitresses?" "Yes, quite the eye candy. I'm surprised you haven't noticed. But then again, you're always so busy with your little projects," she said, her voice dripping with insinuation. The next day, curiosity and concern got the better of me. I decided to visit the restaurant unannounced. As I walked in, I saw them, a group of young, attractive waitresses, all laughing and chatting. Alex was there too, clearly enjoying the attention. I approached, trying to keep my composure. "Hi, Alex. Busy day?" He looked up, startled. "Oh, yeah, just keeping things running. What brings you here?" I glanced at the waitresses, who had scattered at my arrival. "Just thought I'd surprise you." "Who are the new faces?" Alex shrugged, a bit too nonchalantly. "Oh, just some new hires. Good for business, you know." I forced a smile, feeling a knot form in my gut. "Right, good for business." That evening, I brought it up again. "Alex, about the new waitresses." He cut me off, his tone dismissive. They're just employees. Don't make it into something it's not." But it was hard to shake the feeling that something wasn't right. A few days later, I decided to visit the restaurant again, this time in the evening. What I saw confirmed my worst fears. Alex was in a corner, his arm around one of the waitresses, laughing and whispering in her ear. The sight felt like a physical blow. I stood there, frozen, as realization washed over me. The morning sun was barely peeking through the curtains, casting a soft glow in the kitchen where I sat, clutching a mug of coffee that had long since gone cold. The revelation of Alex's affair with a waitress from his restaurant was swirling in my mind, a storm I could no longer ignore. He walked in, his footsteps echoing loudly in the tense silence. "Alex, we need to talk." "About what I saw at the restaurant," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but firm. He just smirked, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "Oh, you mean the new waitresses?" "Yeah, they're a nice addition, aren't they?" I stared at him, disbelief and anger mingling in my chest. "Nice addition? Alex, I saw you with her. Don't treat me like a fool." He leaned against the counter, his smirk widening. "Come on, it's nothing. Just a little fun on the side. You know how it is." "How it is?" My voice rose in incredulity. "You're my husband. Fun on the side isn't how it is supposed to be." Alex took a sip of his coffee, his arrogance palpable. We've been married for what, 3 years now? Things get boring. I needed someone to spice things up." I felt a knot form in my stomach. "So our marriage is just some game to you? Something you get bored of?" He shrugged, his casual demeanor infuriating me. Not a game, just life. I'm a man, Em. I have needs. Needs that obviously you're not fulfilling. I clenched my fists, fighting back tears. I've been here for you, supported you through everything. And this is how you repay me? He laughed, a cold, harsh sound. Repay you? Oh, please. You've been a good wife, sure, but that's not enough. I need excitement, adventure. You're just too plain. The word plain echoed in my ears, a stark reminder of his mother's earlier insults. And what about our vows? Did they mean nothing to you? Alex rolled his eyes. Vows are just words, Em. They don't mean we can't have a little fun. Why don't you loosen up a bit? I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is not a little fun, Alex. You've broken our trust, our marriage. I can't be with someone who has so little respect for me. I want a divorce. His expression finally changed, a flicker of surprise crossing his features. Divorce? Seriously? You're that upset over a harmless fling? It's not harmless, Alex. It's betrayal, I said, my voice breaking. He shrugged, his nonchalance returning. Fine. Have it your way. I've been feeling tied down anyway. As I started the divorce proceedings, the reality of our crumbling marriage hit hard. When Mrs. Carter, Alex's mother, got wind of it, her reaction was just as callous as her son's. I always knew it would come to this, she sneered during a phone call. You were never right for my Alex. Too dull, too domestic. I gritted my teeth, trying to keep my composure. Well, Mrs. Carter, Alex is no longer my problem. He's all yours now. She laughed, a sound filled with malice. Oh, I'm delighted. He needs someone who can keep up with him, not a boring little nobody like you. 6 months after the divorce, I found myself in a place of newfound peace. The house, once filled with tension, now felt serene, a sanctuary from the past chaos. That tranquility was shattered one evening by an unexpected knock on the door. I opened it to find Alex and Mrs. Carter standing there, disheveled and looking defeated. Emily, we need to talk, Alex said, avoiding my gaze. I crossed my arms, feeling a mix of surprise and wariness. Alex? What are you doing here? And Mrs. Carter? Mrs. Carter stepped forward, her usual haughty demeanor gone. Emily, dear, we've had a bit of a setback. The restaurant, it's gone under. I frowned, processing her words. Gone under? What happened? Alex shuffled his feet, a shadow of his former arrogance. Things went downhill after the divorce. I may have made some bad financial choices. Mrs. Carter interjected, her voice desperate. We've nowhere to go, Emily. Our apartment lease is up, and with no income, we can't renew. I was stunned. You want to stay here? After everything that's happened? Alex finally met my eyes, a hint of shame in them. I know I messed up. But this is temporary, just until we get back on our feet. Mrs. Carter added quickly, yes, just for a little while. We wouldn't be a bother. I took a deep breath, the audacity of their request staggering. Alex, Mrs. Carter, after everything that's happened, you really think it's appropriate to ask this of me? Alex's voice was pleading. I know I don't deserve your help, but we're desperate. I shook my head, my decision clear. I'm sorry, but no. You both made it clear how you felt about me and my home. I can't just forget that. Mrs. Carter's face fell, her usual composure crumbling. But where will we go, Emily? Please, you're our only hope. I remained firm, despite the pang of sympathy. You need to figure that out on your own. I did, after everything fell apart. They lingered for a moment, a mix of disbelief and despair on their faces, before finally turning away. As I closed the door, a sense of finality washed over me. I had turned a new page, one where their judgment and betrayal no longer held sway over me. I walked back into my living room, the echoes of their pleas still lingering in the air. But as I sat down, a feeling of empowerment filled me. I had survived their scorn, their betrayal, and come out stronger. My life, once overshadowed by their presence, was now my own again.
All right, everyone's presentations are done, Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.